So these slides and this presentation will be shared, as obviously we're recording it as well, for you to look at. But there are some really good things to get you started in your thinking process. So just a few more, we are in an earthquake zone, so have you, earthquaked your home? There's ways to do that, and it's simple and not too costly. Having out-of-town contacts is important because usually the long-distance lines are not on the normal grid pattern, and it's easier to reach out to somebody out of province and have them as a central place of check-in instead of trying to reach somebody maybe in BC because the local lines are all tied up. But again, this is for documents for you that we can provide you, or you can just look at the slides afterwards. Not to put Aaron into having to do a lot of work, but what I like to always do is maybe in the chat feature, if you could just let me know who has done, put together a grab and go kit or an emergency family kit. If you can put that in the chat, and then we can, I can ask Aaron to follow up on that, because I just want to see how many people on our audience today have actually done a little bit of work or a lot of work to get actually prepared. So when I started emergency management and I went up the ranks and became an emergency program coordinator, I always felt that, or I always thought that my job was to take care of every disaster or an emergency that happened within our local government. And and a few of my staff would be the key piece to doing that. But as I learned over the years, it's a shared responsibility. And this is kind of, those who might know Maslow's theory, is that it's a pyramid of the foundation. So really, individuals and family are the most important piece to preparedness and helping us to recover from any kind of disasters. The more that individuals and families are prepared and businesses are prepared, which we are learning greatly from this COVID, if you are prepared, you're going to be able to get through an event and help others also get through those events that maybe they didn't have the time to prepare. One of the things, as I started earlier, indicated that this is a basic course right now, our basic session that we offer, but there's also the neighborhood concept. So when you're prepared and you're doing well through the event, is that you can go and knock on your neighbor's door next door that might not be able to take care of themselves or have the ability to prepare for themselves, and you can become that neighborhood concept where you're looking out for your neighbor. And when I lived up in the farmlands, the Fraser Valley, we all knew each other. We had our doors unlocked, and we always would look out for each other. And some of the smaller communities are still doing that, but we've kind of lost a lot of that. When we grow, that's kind of the atmosphere that we lose. And so I go out into the communities and I work with neighbors to see if any of their neighborhoods want to become more prepared as a team, and we offer that as a session as well. So any of you that live in communities or cul-de-sacs or apartment buildings or townhouses complex, that's a neighborhood, and then you may have to rely on each other one day as sheltering in place, or after an earthquake helping take care of each other. And we offer some more education on that if you're wanting to do that. Also at your workplace. So occupational health and safety has done a really great job to do more preparedness in the workplace. So you may have some training already from that side of with first aid or fire extinguisher training, etc. So again, it's just building on that foundation of support. In our community, we are very lucky. We always have our first responders. We have our search and rescue volunteers. We have I just got a pop-up window. I don't know if Aaron's got taken care of that person coming into our session. And then, those community groups who do a lot of on-the-ground stuff are all volunteers for us. So emergency support services, the Red Cross. If it wasn't for our volunteer programs, a lot of the events that occur in supporting the community after a disaster or an emergency is really, we wouldn't be able to do it as staff or personnel for local government. We just wouldn't have enough people. So we really count on our volunteers to really support us at the community level. And then, of course, there's the local governments. We come in with our emergency programs. We're lucky. We work in collaboration with all the other local governments, so in the Comox Valley, which really makes us a strong team to be able to offer more services in collaboration. If we get overwhelmed in any event, we also can turn to the provincial government, Emergency Management BC, which is the ones that really look at disasters and emergencies at a provincial level and have a lot more access to resources that we don't. And if they get overwhelmed, as we saw in the 2017 and 2018 forest fires, is they will turn to the federal government to get support, which will bring in resources from all over the world to help us with a disaster like a wildfire. So again, it's just everybody shares that responsibility is a really important key message that we like to share. So how does the emergency program prepare? So for part of my job is really, I don't wait for a disaster to happen. We do a hazard risk and vulnerability assessment, and we get into then what we call the 4 pillars or 4 stages of emergency management. So we look at how can we prevent or mitigate this from happening again. So if it's say Oyster River that's always has been a nuisance to us over the years that I've been here, how can we prevent it from the banks washing out? Well, we can riprap it, and that will affect the community into the future. So we do some mitigation pieces to try to do that. Then we try to prepare, do a preparedness side of it. So just like you're sitting in this session now, is how can we help, community members that might be at risk in an area? If we can't mitigate that, how can we better prepare them to maybe evacuate quicker by having a grab and go kit, or be prepared for, an advance warning, an alert that goes in order, so they know what that means. So having that preparedness as that other pillar they look at. Then we go into the response mode, right? So that's where I spend a lot of my time, is after responses, looking at what that response did, how it affect the first responders, where were our gaps, where are our challenge, and then looking at our emergency plans and updating them and trying to change them. So you can imagine during this COVID-19, we have done some major changes to our way we do operations as well as our plans. But the biggest thing that we've walked away with is for those who have businesses, the business continuity side was a big part of where we all felt that we were missing in any kind of response to a health shortage of staff. Having people, closing office to work remotely was something that we had never really faced as forward as we have to. So a lot of things have changed. And then the recovery piece that we do afterwards. So that's really, it's not after as in such. Recovery actually starts in the moment of response that happens. So we have emergency support services volunteers that if there's an evacuation by a fire department or RCMP, those volunteers would come out to the site and look at what services they can help with those to provide immediate needs to the evacuees. So that's already recovery happening. It's trying to get them some basic needs like shelter, some food, some clothing, so that they can think of what are they going to do in the next few days after this event is over. So after we do all of this, it's a constant scanning of everything that we do. We do training and exercises to try to improve. And I've been around long enough that there is no perfect plan. There is no perfect response to a disaster or an emergency. What we do is we try to work, with our staff and personnel and our volunteers and do the best job we can with the information and the abilities and the resources that we have to respond to it. So as Aaron had touched out, talking a little bit about the BC and hazards, this is not quite an accurate slide. There's more than 57 hazards throughout BC with all the changes with climate and our technology with, pirating and all that of information and off your cell phones and stuff. So there's a lot more, but this is again another area that I always thought, geez, I got a plan for 57 hazards. So as we get smarter and learn a little bit more, is we focus on really what's going to happen in our area, what's happened in the past. So this is where I work really closely with the Comox First Nations. We have a lot of records to go back with local governments, but Comox First Nations had a lot of verbal history that they could share with us is what actually happened in this community. So I didn't know there was a big fire that happened in Sayward and actually almost made it to the Courtney Comox Valley, a big forest fire. So though I knew forest fires were big, I didn't realize there was a history of one that actually came into Comox Valley, which could still be a threat to us as a risk to us in the future. So these are just some of the slides. These all, except for the house falling down, but we do get earthquakes here all the time, and I'll show you a slide later on. But flooding, we're always prone to flood. Lewis Park, if you've been around there, you know that's a tradition. That's, you know, we just change it to a lake during the summer or winter time, and it goes back to a park during the summer. Wildfires or interfaced wildfires, we call them. So these are, we actually had one of these, and I think that's the picture from Comox, where it was actually a house fire. It got into the trees and started to jump over to the neighbor's house. That's the kind of stuff we plan for. And then, as you know, we lovely seeing cruise ships go up the channel all the time, but they carry a lot of fuel and bulk oil on them. So we always were planning with the Coast Guard responses to a major cruise ship. And this is actually one of the ones that happened in the past at Campbell River, where they had to tow the cruise ship into Campbell River Harbor, and it sunk in the harbor. So, so we do, again, history, we do have the history of these hazards. So a comprehensive emergency plan is, so I just wanted to show you, and I'll kind of scroll through this really quickly, but we spend so much time in emergency management on the event. So the lightning bolt there. So the event happens and we go into response mode. And it's all chaotic and everybody's running around and we're trying to figure out, we're opening our plans and we're trying to figure out what's the best way, if it's impacting the community or homes or residents, how are we going to make them safe? That's our first goal, is making it safe for the people or the community that's there. So as you see in this big bubble, the response is crazy, it goes really high, and then it just dies off. And that's reality. But you'll see when I click the next little slide here, is you'll see the community recovery piece. So local governments get their feet back going because usually a lot of them have business continuity plans and they have the abilities to approach other local authorities or the provincial government for help. But it's the community level that the response can go on and on and on. So for example, Christchurch is still, their community in downtown core is still recovering, and that's I think it's over 7 years ago now, that event, that earthquake actually happened. So it's just showing you that that we are trying to change our focus a little bit on community recovery, because that's the greatest impact. I think we know how to respond, though it might be chaotic. The community recovery is the hardest part that we struggle with. And in COVID, that has been identified as well. It's because we were trying to look for food security sources for those that had lost jobs because buildings and offices had to close, as well as trying to support those centers that support vulnerable populations that had to close because they had to find new ways to meet the COVID prevention measures, right? So again, it's just that community aspect is really important for us. And I won't go into much, it's more of an overall slide, but we do have steps on how to do things. We do the risk management, we do mitigation planning and the preparedness plans that help lead us up to hopefully a better way to respond and recover from an event. So what do you think are the top hazards for the Comox Valley? And again, this is a hard process to ask on chat. So I'll ask it out there, put it in the chat, and we'll come back to that slide. If you can just flag that for me, Aaron, that would be great. Just what do you think is the top slides? And I'll continue moving on through my presentation. So there's a lot of natural hazards, as we know. There's man-made hazards and technological hazards. So this world of smartphones has really increased a lot of that. The process of removing cash from our system by tap and go is adding a lot of new hazards that weren't there several years ago. So our hazards are always increasing, but the more they increase, the more preparedness that we do, the better we'll be able to respond to that. So the types of hazards, talked about a little bit some more, but is actually knowing the risk that's in your community. So I don't know who we're representing here tonight, but I'll look kind of globally at Vancouver Island in general. What we have seen is our biggest risk is earthquake. So one of our biggest is earthquake. What is the changing trend right now is the severe weather events that are happening based on climate change. So I kind of moved here from the lower mainland because they said the weather was mild all year round, and you never had snow on the ground, only on the mountains, and that's where I like it. In the first year I hit, I think you guys got your biggest snowfall you've had in years, and then every year after that we've had snowfall that's hit the lower valley. So there is a sign that the weather is changing. I'm not saying it's global warming, I'm just saying that it's changing, maybe changing back to historical ways, but that is one of the things that's really been affecting us. And I keep records of every event that we respond to, and the intensity of rain that we get nowadays. We have had events that have dumped rain within 24 hours that usually would come down in 3 days. And so that has now created isolated flooding and mudslides in some of the areas in our community. Along the coast, like Bates Road, I've been out there a few times, we do have these hazards in our community. So I've talked about a little bit the earthquake. That is up in the corner. There is the Courtney high school or elementary school, sorry. And basically, this is back in 1948 when we had our big earthquake. And you'll see a 1948 building stood pretty well. The only thing that was the hazard was really the chimney that they had for heating the school fell inside, but it also fell outside. And I don't know if you can see it on your slide, there's people standing outside the doorway, and that's all the brickwork that fell down into the entranceway. And so that's why we teach drop, cover, and hold on, because if you were running out that when the shaking started and run out the building, you would have probably got killed by the bricks falling and not by the earthquake itself. So and then again, we have bad weather, wildfires, and flooding. So these the flooding in the picture is actually from a home in Oyster River that has a tradition to flood almost every year, right behind the store, just as you go over the bridge in Oyster River. And when we used to go in the SRD and I respond to help them out every time, their preparedness plan became a canoe tied to their back porch. And they leave their cars up on the road, on the high road, and they would canoe out to get to work, because the only thing that would flood would be their basement. And you'll see the watermark on the side. It's about 3 feet deep, right on the wood there. So that was their plan. They loved where they lived. They said it only flooded a couple times a year. So they got a canoe and they adapted. So what about COVID-19? Well, we all are living that right now, and we know that we've learned a lot, and that's why we're on Zoom tonight, right? Which I find to be pros and cons, and I think it's a benefit that we've learned that we can deliver training anywhere through this tool, and I think that's a positive. So we do have, I said, we do have earthquake events. This is just a captured, I think, when Aaron and I were putting this presentation together back in September. But these are the events that occur all the time. You can go to the Natural Resources Canada earthquake site, and you can click and find this information all you want. But we do have them, and that's only my point, is not to scare anybody about their earthquake's going to happen. It's when it's going to happen. It's not if it's going to happen. Seismologists have said, we are prone to have it. It's on the 250-year either side of it happening. So they say it could happen anytime. So, but we've had them here, and I've experienced them here. I think my first couple years, and I think it was my second year in Campbell River, I was sitting at my desk when we had the one that happened off of Haida. So you could actually feel it in my desk. I always thought somebody was playing with my office chair. So what we also want to educate about is, because earthquakes can create other events and hazards. The earthquake might not affect you, but a lot of people, they're thinking, okay, I need to go find a shelter to go to. I need to get somewhere to get help. We also want you to consider that there might be side effects from the earthquake, like severe flooding. A riverbank might collapse, a creek bed might collapse. We do work very closely with BC Hydro, and they are doing some seismic work on a lot of their infrastructure, which is good, and they're being a lot transparent about it. So they are educating communities about that. There's the potential of hazards and risks, right? Riverbanks can collapse. So, you know, we do have the Courtney River. It's, you know, it had some riprap, but it could collapse and take over the floodplain again. So we just want you to know those kinds of things, those kinds of hazards. One of the other ones, liquefaction. So liquefaction, if those who don't know, is basically when the shaking happens, it brings up in low-lying sort of water areas like beaches and farmland and deltas. When it shakes, it brings the water or liquids up to the top, and anything that's heavy on top will sink. So so if you'll see in Christchurch, there was pictures where houses had dropped 3 feet because the land had liquefied, the mud had collapsed, and the houses couldn't be held by the ground anymore. So they sunk into the mud. So that can happen in our area. So the S turns by Superstore, that's all built up on packed bedrock, and that could liquefy. It could sink into the shoreline. So we know that. That's one of the things that Ministry of Transportation we'll be looking at, and then, you know, addressing if we have to change directions of traffic flow. So we have optionate ways. That's the reason why the Veterans Parkway had been extended as a secondary way out to the highway, because it was to increase the potential to get out of the Comox area if you had to, and for first responders to get in, or resources to get in. Down power lines. So again, we don't want you just running out the door down the street. There's, you know, or if you're in a community with gas lines ruptured, these are all secondary hazards that we have to think about before you want to go anywhere, right? So, and I'll talk about the personal planning of an evacuation a little bit here. So during an earthquake, what we really want you to do is drop cover and hold on, and, you know, wherever you are, and that might be under a sturdy piece of furniture. It might be in the middle of a gymnasium, just getting down on the knee on your ground and protecting your head and knee, tucking your head and knees in, and curl in a ball. Again, it's trying to protect you. Our buildings are built now to very strong seismic levels. So we don't feel most buildings will collapse, but things might fall off, like lighting or things that have been mounted to the wall incorrectly, and that's where the hazard comes. And so if you're even in your own home and you haven't fastened things to cabinets or to shelving, getting hit by a cyclopedia or a china cabinet might hurt, but if you're down low and protecting yourself, it probably won't kill you, right? Because you're protecting yourself. So that's most important. If you're outdoors, is take cover, but don't go in under trees, because trees do sometimes, depending on the type of wave of the earthquake, they can be they can fall over or break limbs, because there will be aftershocks. So you may not see damage on them right away, but they might collapse. Trying to stay away from hydro lines or any kind of buildings with glass. I know when emergency managers, when we go down to Vancouver for our conference, we always play little pranks on each other and say, okay, earthquake, and we're standing down in the middle of Hornby Street in downtown Vancouver, and you're looking up at a 20-story glass building. And so we all just say, well, you can only do so much, right? So we do our drop, cover, and hold, and hope for the best, right? Because we try to do what they tell us to do, to increase our survival rate. If you're in a vehicle, this is another area we've learned some lessons. So we've always indicated to stay in your car and stop your vehicle, and wait till it's safe. In Christchurch, that's what people had done, because the Christchurch has a lot more activity than we do, and they do a lot of this training as well. People stopped their cars in the middle of the street, like they were told. And so after the large event, they couldn't move those cars because of the debris on the road. So what they did was they came in with a big earth mover and they shoveled the cars out of the way, because there was no other way to move them. So they now educate you to look for a safe place to pull over to the side and then stop. And looking in their community, they have a lot of brick fascia on their buildings to keep it old Victorian style. They say just check your surroundings and see you're not in something that's more hazard. And if you are, get low into the car, because usually the people that have been killed in the car have been sitting upright and not tucked into the low areas of below the seat, if they can get in there. So, and then of course that has allowed the middle of the road to be easily cleared of debris, so that first responders can get in. So after an earthquake on coastal areas, so I don't know how many of you enjoy the Tofino Long Beach area or go up to the north tip of the island. But basically, if you live on the island and you're on the west coast, if you feel severe shaking, is that there's also a warning. That's a warning to get up to high ground, because what follows sometimes in an earthquake located close to water is a tsunami. And a tsunami is not just a wave that you see in the movie, the big curling wave. It can be a series of waves. It doesn't mean the first wave is going to be the biggest wave. It could be the last wave that's the biggest. But but if you feel the shaking, head to high ground. And if you're in communities like Tofino, Ucluelet, they mark their communities quite well with tsunami assembly spots and tsunami risk areas. So just pay attention to those if you are vacationing in those kind of communities to do that. So staying off your phone is important, and off the internet if you can. With social media, we found it to be a lot better because now people are, doing one Facebook tweet, which takes very little data to reunite with their family, saying I'm okay. So that's been a good process. Whereas in the old days, and I was guilty of it as too, as I look, was that an earthquake? Oh, I'm going to go onto the earthquake site and use up all the data plan, data broadband that's available. So we're encouraging to stay off your phones if you don't need to. If you have a process that you can send out a quick text message to family that can share that you're okay to the rest of your family, that's a better process. And then also having, hopefully a grab and go or a portable radio. And this is when I was really surprised when we had our severe weather event in Campbell River a few years ago. People were coming to us and saying, where can we get a radio? We need to get radios. You need to supply us with radios. And I said, well, did you drive here? Because there's a radio in your car that will get emergency notifications sent to it. So it's just having, the people sometimes, I guess, when they get stressed, they're not thinking quite clearly. So yeah, use whatever, a radio in your car, a portable radio in your grab and go kit, all important. The go sign that we have, again, because we're not doing this physically, we usually hand these out as part. So I can give these to Erin and she has the list. We can get them to, and on one side it says help, the other side it says okay. And so if you're okay and you put it up in your window or at the end of your driveway, if you have a long driveway, this helps first responders. If they see the okay sign, they're going to go to the next neighbor that doesn't have a sign or has the help sign up. And so it helps them do their triage a lot quicker. So we can get those to you. So talking about tsunami already, I kind of touched on this, but the key piece to this one is the Comox Valley is at low risk for any tsunami, either from Alaska or from off the coast of Tofino. Because of any kind of wave it can't get through so strongly through all the broken islands that on the north end, as well as it would have to come a long way up from the Victoria end of the island. As I say that, the only, and there is no modeling through the province as of yet, they are going to do some studying, is that there is a submarine shelf just off of the Sunshine Coast. That submarine shelf is about 300 feet. And if an earthquake happens on the Sunshine Coast, that may slide and cause a small tsunami type wave. But right now the province says that it would not be anything bigger than our normal king tide levels of 18 feet, which is what happens yearly on our coastline on the east side. So again, just very low risk. This is a little education piece just for you to know some of the signs that you might see that come up on some of the apps that are out there now. The province is doing push notifications, letting you know when you enter certain areas. that if an event happens, we use Connect Rocket. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, you can go to the regional district's website, and under emergency management, you'll see on the left-hand side, it says emergency notifications. And you can just sign up to wherever you want, where you work, live, and play, is tick the box. And if anything happens in the community, we will send out a Connect Rocket mass notification to let you know where you need to go, or if it's a real event, or just an update of some information. So what we've been told on the West Coast is for the tsunami is 20 meters is the height that you would want to go to. Again, if you're not anywhere near Tofino, Ucluelet, and you happen to be out on some of the trails, is go as high as you can. And just, again, to not try to guess that, oh, I'm at 20 meters, and Mother Nature has a way of sometimes surprising us. So go up as high as you can and keep going. The other side of it, if you don't have notification, and that's why we want you always have a radio of some kind with you, is turn to the marine channel if you have or weather channel, and they will broadcast an all clear signal if the tsunami is finished or didn't arrive. Okay, so that's an important piece if you're hiking or enjoying recreation on the coastline, is have some kind of radio communication process with you. This is another thing that we also hand out, is to get you started. So again, this is I'll get the drop off a box to Aaron with the OK signs. Is that these are on our website as well, and I'll give you that opportunity. There's a website at the end of the presentation, but these are books that you can use to help you get personally prepared, and it goes through a lot of the things like how much water you need, having a communications plan, etc. But we'll touch on some of this a little bit as I go into here. So one of the pieces within this guide is having an emergency plan and have an evacuation plan. So as you see in the left-hand side picture, is there certain things you want to put in your grab and go kits or your family plan? And then there's different ways. You can have a backpack, you can have a pull-along suitcase. What we really encourage people to have is have at least a grab and go, because if you have a house fire or if something happens in your home that you have to get out really quickly in the middle of the night, and you're only in your pajamas, is you can grab that pack and it'll have a lot of your stuff that you might need for the next day. So like, your backup charge card, or glasses that you might have had to leave behind because you ran out really quickly, some extra clothing, some food, just again, to have something that's, that are really important, some documents that you might need to access replace your wallet, etc. So there is a checklist that's in those guides that help you with that. Also, an evacuation plan for fire. So, and we always encourage having a plan A and a plan B to that evacuation route, just in case something happens. If the fire happens on one side of your house, you have to go up the other, but practice it. That's the other key piece, as well as doing the earthquake evacuation, because they are different. The fire one is you're trying to get out as quickly as possible. The earthquake one is you're gonna drop, cover, and hold on until the shaking stops. Then from wherever position you're in, on the floor, under a table, is you're going to look around for hazards before you exit the building, because the reports are most injuries and deaths occur by people getting electrocuted or getting severely injured by the objects that are in the home or in the building they're evacuating from, not from the earthquake itself. Knowing your child or grandchild's school plan. So what is the process? And I think the schools are doing a really good job at this. I've been working with them for the last 5 years. I think they educate the parents on that process quite well, but just making sure that if you know what they're going to do with the kids if an earthquake happens. Most schools have an assembly spot that they're going to put the kids, and then they're going to go shelter in place if that's the case. But then who's picking up the child if you can't get there? So again, just having that knowledge and it written down somewhere, and then the rest of your family being aware of that. So I know in my family, when I lived with my parents, when I was in earlier days, you know, I was in charge of the emergency plan because that was my kind of my interest level, but they didn't want anything to do with it. And I always said to them, you need to know now because I may not always be here. So always making sure you're sharing those tips with your family. So emergency communication plan, establish a family emergency patient contact, like I said, out of province, someone reliable that you know that usually will be around or answer their phone if you have to send that one quick message to them. Having important contact information with you. So a lot of us have smartphones, so we've loaded our contacts and information on there. But what happens if that dies or you leave it behind? Do you have those contacts and information that you can reach out to people if you have to leave your home or your business? Using social media is a good way, we think, for reuniting family members, because it takes very limited data, and with one post to Facebook, you can inform 300 of your friends if that's how many you have, right? For short term, we also, and this is really getting harder and harder to find, is a hardwired telephone. So most of the telecommunications companies are moving to voice over IP, which is internet. So, but what they've done now with the feedback from the province is that they are having battery or generator backup systems to be able to run those for so many hours. So if you do have a Shaw account that's VoIP, is that you'll probably find down the road a generator or a power box that will drive it. If you're a TELUS homeowner, usually in your basement or in a room in your home, is you'll see a backup battery that will run it for 2 to 3 hours. So you'll still have some ability to get some calls out if you do need to use it. The other walkie-talkie styles is a lot of neighborhood communities are starting to use this so that they don't have to walk down the street and put themselves at risk. They go to these as part of their plan, and they just radio down to Bonnie down the street and say, hey, Bonnie, you okay? Are you on radio? And if they don't hear from her, because that's their plan, if they don't hear it, then they'll send out a team to go and see if Bonnie needs help. So I talked about this already a little bit more, the smartphone emergency devices. So a lot of alerts you can get now, the apps you can get on your own smartphone from the province. Alert Ready is the big one. So that one right now is only going to be used. Right now, they're testing it for the tsunami. They're having some good and bad luck with it because older cell phones don't recognize a lot of the coding, but they're improving. They will eventually look at using it for weather alerts as well. So, but I mean, the Weather Channel is also doing those apps as well. So there's lots of, if you go to your Google Store, Apple Store, you can see a lot of apps out there for becoming as knowledgeable as I do from getting alerts ahead of time. Sometimes maybe too much tripping of the phone going off all the time. And there's lots of websites and stuff out there we can provide that to as well. So preparing your home and office is, quite simple to get started. You can go get kits purchased. There's a bunch of companies out there. We have a local company that does this as well, puts packages together. They're very costly, but if you're wanting to get it done quickly and budget's not an issue, then there you can go to those. But really, a lot of it is kind of like dollar store kind of stuff. You can go to the dollar store and buy a cheap backpack and throw some of this stuff in there. You might only have to get some of the tinfoil filled water containers and maybe the pet supplies. But a lot of it you can get from the dollar store. And again, you're hoping you don't have to use it, so it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It can just be something that, again, it's going to get you through a few days. If it's an earthquake, it might need to get you through several days to a few weeks. But again, there's a start to that list. So one of the things I like to always share is basically it's your preparedness level. So in a disaster, your level of comfort will be in direct proportion to your level of preparedness. And that image is not the best plan, okay? So that's hopefully if you later tonight, if you haven't done anything, you go into an old junk drawer and you're pulling out an old flashlight with some batteries and put it on your counter and saying, I'm gonna start my kit tomorrow. That's a win for all of us tonight. That's a win for you and your family tonight. So just review. So basically, it's really simple to become prepared. It's just knowing the risks. So I've kind of given you an overview of those key ones we have in the Comox Valley and Vancouver Island. Is to make a plan. Don't procrastinate on the plan. Share it with family and friends, and really getting a kit of some kind. A grab and go is really, I think, the best to get started with, and then build up slowly to a family kit. That if you do have to stay, if you after an earthquake, if your home is still standing, but you're just without power to it, you can still survive. You know, basically by having a kit. Having your barbecue out back that you can still cook food on. So you can do a lot in times of tough situations. And that's our websites there. I just want to point out that tomorrow at 10:15, we are having our big provincial earthquake shakeout drill. So I encourage you to even practice the drop, cover, and hold on if this is the first time you know about it. But for those who might have offices or schools or buildings that they work in, is eventually work up to an evacuation and determine where you're going to go and have an option A, option B, and if you can get an option C, that's great, because when you go outside, what might it look like when the day you came in may be looking different when you go out the day after an earthquake. So having some optional sites to go to be very important. And that's it. I'll take any questions and I'll stop sharing, I guess. There, okay.
Thank you for all of that information. There was a lot of really useful pieces in there. And as just a side note to everybody else, I will go through that presentation and pull out relevant links, and also anything that Howie mentioned during the presentation, for example, that app, I'll make sure to send that out in the follow-up email. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to post in the chat, or you can voice your questions as well. Is there any community checkpoints in the Valley in regards to emergencies where people could gather supplies?
No, there are no. There are assigned reception center or evacuation centers. We've predetermined all through the valley, all the way from Fanny Bay to Black Creek. We don't have caches of supplies. What we do is we look at facilities where we can have our emergency support services come in and look at providing those services to evacuees from a disaster. The only caches we do have are through Island Health. We do have some clinics that are stored in a couple of key locations, which have cots and blankets and stuff like that in them.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? And if the questions do come up after the presentation, I'm gonna I can pass those on to Howie, and he can answer. Hopefully that's okay with you.
No, yeah. So I don't know. So you can provide them our regional district number, right? The 6,000 number, because I don't always work at the office, but they know how to reach me from there. I'd be happy to answer any kind of questions. I also throw it out to you if there's others that you think would be interested in this, or if you're interested in a neighborhood concept process, I'd be happy to try to offer that as well, probably through a Zoom process, and but definitely happy to offer that as well.
Okay, if there aren't any further questions, I'm going to shift the floor to Warren from Mars. And like I said, if questions do come up, feel free to fire me an email, and I will be sending all of the resources that we discussed in the first portion of the presentation via email. And with that, I am going to switch hosting privileges to Warren. Okay. Okay, Warren, I will unmute you, hopefully. Are you able to unmute? Oh, there we go. Okay, go ahead, Warren.
Okay, my name's Warren Warjig. I am a fish and wildlife biologist. Aaron left a bit of a preview right at the very beginning that I started early. If you think that it being at 5 years old and someone lets you bottle feed a moose calf, yeah, that creates a pretty good impression for the rest of your life. My father was a helicopter pilot, and he would fly around the BC ungulate biologist quite often. They were responsible for transplanting the California bighorn sheep into BC and then managing the population. So I used to spend a lot of time with them in the helicopter and working with the ungulates. So again, that sort of pushed me towards the biology field. Vancouver Island and the area around it, it's a really great place to recreate and play. But before we came and colonized, that was all habitat, and there was a balance of predator and prey. And as my professor used to say, just remember that as soon as you leave the truck, you're part of the food chain. So I'm hoping that the talk today will prevent anybody from being part of the food chain, at least prematurely. So we do have a PowerPoint presentation. It's what I want to cover is a bit of background on bears, mostly focus on grizzly and black bear. We can talk about cougar a little bit as well. The presentation I have is mostly aimed at professionals that work out in the field. So it could be mining, or it could be engineers or foresters or other biologists that go out and work in the field. So there's a bit of a focus there. You'll notice some of the language. I'll talk about merchantable timber. So that just means it's timber big enough, a log that's going to be big enough to make lumber. You'll see the relevance of that when we get into it. There's some really basic things that you can do, which is it's emergency preparing, and I'm not going to go into great detail, but there was quite a widely publicized on the media event. It was up Quadam River, which is directly north of Campbell River, between Butte Inlet and Toba Inlet. And this person, I don't know if he could have done anything more wrong. And basically what transpired is he went out on a boat to Quadam River. Nobody knew where he was. There were people at a logging camp there. He didn't check in with them. He rode his mountain bike up a road in an area known to have a high number of grizzly bears, and he had his earbuds in. And what I think everybody has to understand is grizzly bears aren't out looking to attack you. They would much rather be left alone. The last thing you want to do ever is to surprise. It's whether it's a grizzly bear or a black bear. You do not want to surprise them. You want to let them know that you're there. And the other, and how you do that is when you're out in the field, if you're hiking or biking, you have to let them know that you're there. There are a lot of people that recommend an air horn because it's nice and loud, but through whatever mechanism, and it's kind of interesting that their hearing is ideally tuned to hear people talking. So on a calm day, when it's not windy or if you're not by a noisy river, they can hear you speaking in just general conversation over 600 meters away. They have very good hearing, and they have very poor eyesight. They have just horrible eyesight. How they see the world is much different than us. If you were to dissect the human brain, the front of the brain is the largest part of our brain, and our sense of smell are two parts of our brain that sit on the bottom are basically not much larger than a grape. Probably over a third of a grizzly bear's brain is tuned to smell, and so that's how they see the world. And black bears as well. There's a lot of similarities in what their abilities are. So the grizzly bear males, their territory, and they're one of the worst to run into, is a very territorial. And the difference between territorial and predatory is predicates a much different response. If it's a territorial attack, then that's when you play dead and you just try to protect yourself as much as you can. We're quite lucky. If you're down in the bottom third of BC, all of the animals, all of the bears we have are pretty much territorial. And I say pretty much because there's always that outlier. Further north you go, the more likely that the black bears will be predatory. And once you're past the terrace area and up towards Whitehorse, probably about 50%, it's estimated, that are predatory. So when you're in a situation like that, it's sort of up to you to read the situation at the time, whether to act in a passive way or fight back. With a cougar, it's always predatory, even when it's territorial. The video that's gone viral is, to me, looked like it was a female cougar that was protecting young, so they came across that. I always question the sanity of people when they won't put down their camera and they'll videotape the whole thing instead of picking up a rock and acting aggressive like they're supposed to. There were a lot of rocks as he walked back, and he would occasionally turn his back on the cougar, so that wasn't a good thing. So how to work and play around bears. I don't know how many bears you can see in the picture here. This was actually an experimental logging setting where the company opened up patches around brush, and it improved. It was a big improvement over the quality of or at least the amount of forage that was produced in the area for the grizzly bears. So that was one of the foresters that was involved with that. So I mentioned that the males, they have a territory of about 1,800 square kilometers, and they protect it quite aggressively. The only exception is when the fish are running and there's a real abundant fish run, and then that's where you see male and female and different size age class of grizzly bears all foraging together to get the fish. They'll do that without getting in a fight or being territorial. They've been a pretty persecuted bunch, both the grizzly bear and the black bear, but mostly the grizzly bear. The black bears, because they're smaller, they've learned to run faster than a grizzly bear, and hide a little more. So they're a more passive animal. My professor used to say that grizzly bears were just born with 2 scoops of attitude instead of 1. The only extensive populations that are left in all of North America, the grizzly bear used to be across all of North America, are populations in BC, Alaska, and the Yukon. The BC populations are about 15,000. The experts looking at how much there is to eat for the bears, grizzly bears, estimate that there's a capacity to have 22,000 bears, but it becomes limiting because of the large extent of the male grizzly bear's territory. So they think it'd be up to 22,000 that it could support, but there's 15,000, and it's still growing. So the populations are expanding. They are what they call blue listed, sort of at risk of their population diminishing to a level so low that they would be switched to red listed. Our conservation data center monitors all of the species, whether it's plants or animal, in BC. And how they work it is if the bear or a particular plant is at risk in one part of the province, then the entire province they become blue listed. And really, thank you for, I saw the question. I'll get to that. There's benefits and disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is that the populations of grizzly bear that are mostly at risk are down in the most eastern part of the East Kootenays, but the benefit of recognizing when you have one population that goes down is you're able to prepare for whatever the factors are in the rest of the province. So grizzly bears, the females have 1 to 3 cubs every 3 to 4 years. But that also depends on their ability, on the female's ability to protect the cubs. And the number 1 cause of mortality in grizzly bears is actually infanticide. So the male will kill the cubs because the female won't come into estrus if she has cubs, and they will stay with the female every 3 to 4 years. So grizzly bears and black bears, they both share a lot of the habitat, but there's some distinct differences. Grizzly bears hibernate up in the high elevation, and it's really up into almost the alpine, but it's, when I say above areas of merchantable timber. There can still be trees, but you wouldn't ever see any logging there. They try for a north or an east aspect and in areas of high snow. And the reason for that is they don't want to wake up too early. They truly hibernate, and they don't want to wake up too early. So what they want to do is time when they wake up in the spring when the plants down below where they're going to head over to the south aspect, across the river or whatever. And so they don't want to wake up unless there's a good abundance of groceries for them. Black bear dens are almost exclusively in tree cavities, and very few are excavated into the ground. So next slide. So black bears, mating occurs in June or July. Cubs are born in January, February during hibernation. So the cubs are literally the size of a small kitten. And so basically the mother will wake up and and we'll find that she has the cubs, which I always thought would always be an odd situation to be in. One of the things they need in order to survive, they don't truly hibernate, but they go into a very deep sleep. They need a den that's dry. They need a den that's warm, and a den that's secure. And if a pack of wolves is able to find and get into the den, then it's not very secure, and so they're vulnerable to even small predators when they're in the nest. So next slide. So I've got a hard hat held up in this picture, and that is a really good bear den. And so a bear can squeeze through that. If they can squeeze their head through, it's just like a big giant water balloon, and they can pull themselves through inside. And if they can't quite get their head through, then they scratch at it. Quite often, you'll see scratch marks, and sometimes it will be 15, 20 meters up the tree where the entrance is. What they do is they go in there, and with the rotten material, the rotten wood inside, is they'll excavate that and push it up against that opening so that it seals off the opening. The bears, when they go to hibernation or go to deep sleep, they'll eat a lot of hemlock or Douglas fir bark, and that's used to constipate them. So when you find the nest, you find their nests, or some big nests, find their dens, the only scat you see inside are those that's left by the cubs, and it's actually very minimal. So next. This is one den that we found. At first we thought it looked like it was excavated, but what the bear had done, I doctored the photo in there, so it's not actually there. But what the bear had done is gone in and then excavated up into the tree where it was dry. So it was hollow. There was some bears that were showing up in Courtney, and a lot of people were taking pictures of them with the drone footage. There was a big cottonwood tree that looked like the top had broken off, and the interior of the tree was hollow. So we call those chimney trees, but they're really good for bear hibernation as well. And studies in Oregon have shown that just from the slow rotting wood on the inside of those trees, that the average temperature inside the tree was 72 degrees. So it was nice and warm. It's kind of interesting because it contrasts with bats, who, when they go into hibernation and they're hibernacular, they want an area that's really cool. So the different species want different things when they do their hibernation. So next. Yeah, these are just more. If you look at over the one on the right, there's a little bit of fur and just a real minor amount of scat. But on the right and the left, you can see how there's claw marks and excavation for them to get in the nest. So those were really secure nests for the bears to be in. Now, part of the problem here is particularly with black bears, they need, before you can have a hollow tree, it needs to be pretty old. So with urban development, farming, and logging, there can be a theoretical limit on how many bears can occupy a certain area. We haven't seen it yet. It's a strong theory, but if they can't get a good denning site, then they have to use something that's substandard and open to predation. And so next. Yeah, so if you look in the bottom of this tree, the whole base it's all wet. It's almost in standing water. But what the bear did in here, they got inside and then they excavated upward and built, and then excavated into a shelf, uh, and then that's where their den was. Now it's more population of grizzly bears that have interest, it seems, for population monitoring. But for grizzly bears, there's 56 different areas within the province. We call them grizzly bear production units. And that's where the population is kind of isolated either by mountain or by water. And so the genetics are similar and shared across these large areas. So so there's 56 of those in the province. The real difference between, the big difference between grizzly bear and black bear is the grizzly bears have that unique physiology for going into hibernation for a long period of time. It's generally between 5 and 7 months. So that's a long time to not be eating. They're also a little bit different with the black bears, and the black bears are almost like deer. They go around and browse and just make their way around, trying all different things. Whereas grizzly bears, their physiology and their behavior is it's very much a timing thing. When they come out of hibernation, that's when the lush south-facing slopes, where you get all of your skunk cabbage in particular, and your vaccinium, your huckleberries are out, and they'll come out of hibernation and they'll head immediately for those areas, and then they'll follow the berry production. They'll be there in the spring, and then the berries come out later up high, so they work their way back up the hill, and then when the fish start to run, they hit the fish runs. So they're very, very tuned to the specific time of year. So they're with their behavior and their denning. And it's almost like they switch and seek out the different foods in a fairly quick fashion, and they'll move very with purpose to go to the next area. So the habitat that the bears prefer, and this is important to know for when you're out hiking, is the habitat. Grizzly bears and black bears, they share pretty much the same habitat. With the big exception is that the grizzly bears will go into tundra or high alpine, like treeless areas, and go out right out onto an estuary out in the open. And black bears will not do that. Grizzly bears have known. There's a lot of documentation of grizzly bears basically dominating or reducing populations of black bears. They will be predatory with the black bears. But there's another side to it too. If there's a lot of black bears, grizzlies will tend to avoid those areas too. So they have been coming over to Vancouver Island, but there is no evidence that the grizzly bears have ever had a strong settling on the island historically. Might be interesting for people to know that grizzly bear, there was 2 waves of grizzly bears that came across with separate ice ages, and one of them evolved into the polar bear. So the polar bear and the grizzly bear are very closely related. And you're saying that I see it's been in the news lately that there's a new type of bear out there, but grizzly bears and black bears have gotten together and made babies for a long time now. It just doesn't happen very often. So next.
I actually have a question. Someone is wondering if it's 1 bear per den.
Yes, yes, it's just one pair per den. But that's what's really interesting though, is thanks for that question, because it just, the males are very territorial, the females are not. And there's a lot of evidence now with hair snag technology in that they can they put in a non-reward lure, so it would maybe smell like chicken grease or gravy or something, but they don't go away with a memory of it being equated to food. It just smelled good, so they showed up. They put little strands of barbed wire and sort of knee level, and their hair gets snagged on it. And the advent of genetic assessment has been just wonderful, and it's becoming quite cheap now. But what they found is these gatherings of matriarchs in family orders will get together, and that a senior matriarch can identify and remember 3 generations of bears, which this is all relatively new information, but it is quite fascinating. Give you an idea that they do have a pretty good kind of a social setting, even though they're just a bear. So next.
I will just let you know we have about 10 minutes left before the session is scheduled to wind up. Just a heads up.
Okay, next. So grizzly bears, mating occurs April to November. The fertilized egg, and this actually happens in black bears as well, is the implantation into the womb does not occur until the onset of hibernation. If the female is not nourished enough, didn't get enough calories, the eggs will not be implanted. So if she's moderately good, one egg will implant. If she's in really good shape, she'll have 3 cubs. So if you've ever wondered about that, if they had 3 cubs, then they're a really healthy bear. So cubs are born late summer, and they stay with the sow for up to 2 years. And at that point, the most aggressive bear is when you get between a sow and a cub. So this is, and if you're especially if you're in the wrong area and they're foraging and they don't pay attention to you being there. Now, what I tell our foresters and engineers to do is, if it's a quiet day, never go more than 50 meters without letting out a really good hauler. And we do I do Harry Belafonte, so it's always Dale. But so what is extra important, and what I find where most people fail, is after you yell, you stand very quietly and you listen, and you listen for 15 seconds, and that may seem like an eternity, but if there is a bear there and the bear hears you, there's a very high likelihood that they will let you know that they're either displeased or they will just move on. If you ever get an indication and they'll be huffing, sometimes they'll bat around an old stump or just even act a little bit aggressively, rocking back and forth, ears down, and this is all from a distance. You just turn around and you leave and you come back another day. If you do happen to get attacked, first of all, you should always carry bear spray. And you can take courses where there's bear spray cans where you spray water, so you realize how far it goes. Every time you go out for a hike, you check that the bear spray nozzle isn't clogged with branches and sticks, depending how aggressively you hike. One of the most fail-safe ways to go out safely is there's never been a recorded incident of a bear attack if there's been 5 or more people. So going out in group, the more people that you are with, the less likely you're going to have a problem. Just last month, I was showing some foresters what it was called a mark trail, and mark trail is where it's highly marked. It's a territorial boundary, warning other bears to stay away. And as a group of 4 of us, we saw the bear, and it wasn't interested in coming any closer to us. I saw the same bear 3 more times. I was out there actually monitoring for how productive some of their spring forage habitat was, and actually in my entire career, I've never had a problem with a grizzly bear when you're being properly noisy. Now, the bear spray is very effective, but if you do get attacked, there's 2 choices on what to do. My preference is to always wear, like we call it, cruiser's vest, or wear a backpack. There's a fairly high percentage of reports of attacks that the bear will bite at your back. So if you've got a backpack and it bites it, then that's all the better for you. So you can lay down in a fetal position, lock your fingers behind your neck. It's reported quite frequently the bear will try to fit your head into its mouth. Don't let it do that, but you just sort of roll over and roll a bit to roll your head so that they can't get traction on it. WorkSafe BC, I haven't been able to contact them on this. They say to lay down and spread your legs, and what that does, it stops the bear from rolling you over. You can hold your position. My concern about that choice is that your femoral artery runs down the back of your leg, and if that's what they're going to be biting at, then that's a pretty bad thing to have to expose. So next slide.
I actually have a question from one of the participants asking, if you are hiking with small kids, will that make you more or less attractive to being attacked?
With the bear, it's probably less. You want to have your kids close by. With the cougar, almost all fatal attacks are because of children being attacked. So the trick with kids is keeping them close by. So yeah, so next. So that's kind of what a grizzly bear den looks like. What they do is they push the dirt dump over the end. They're also vulnerable to predators like wolves. Next. And that's what one actually looks like. And you wouldn't see that hole when it was being occupied. There'd be dirt pushed up against the opening. And you can see that the excavations can be quite large. Next. Yeah, so just a bit about habitat. Class 1 habitat, habitats are just broken into 4 different units, and class 4 really isn't habitat, but all it is habitat that gets used for 3 or more seasons. And so with estuaries, that's a really big one. And alluvial floodplains, like it just mean rivers that migrate a lot. And they've got a lot of salmonberry and other rich forbs and berries. And so for spring habitat, they're down low. For summer habitat, they're up high. And then in the fall, they come back down for the fish. The time of day when you hike makes a big difference as well. Almost all attacks happen, or a very high percentage, particularly cougar, happen in either early in the morning, sort of dusk, and later at dawn. So next. Just quick picture of class 2 and class 1. The one with all of the big tall skunk cabbage, that would, and then that's all blueberry in the background. That's definitely class 1 habitat, and then the one on the right is be more class 2. Avalanche chutes aren't always class 1. If the alder gets too established, it shades out all of the undergrowth, and so it becomes poor habitat for bears. So next. Yeah, so here's the how do you work in groups. If you have a camp, that's a whole other thing. You want to keep your food away from where you're sleeping, and you want to, particularly with grizzly bears, you want to have noise traps. So it's fishing line with bells, and that's a whole other talk on how to do that. Be aware of where the wind is where the wind is blowing. The very first cover was a picture of a grizzly bear I took when I had the wind at my face. I was able to get quite close and get a picture of it. What the picture doesn't show is that the wind changed very quickly, and then the bear turned its head after it smelled me, so I had to make a quick exit. If you're walking into the wind, is to be extra vigilant because you don't want to surprise the bear again, and use extreme caution. If you are in strong wind or loud water, running water, you would be Harry Belafonte every 20 to 30 meters instead of every 50 meters. So next. So this is it's all about looking for signs. So grubbing, if you find a carcass that's half buried, just leave the area. Don't wait for a warning. That's a bear will vigorously defend its kill. The mud wallows, usually only see those out in the estuaries. Now browse, that's a little hard to tell what's been eating what, but grizzly bears will take a red elderberry, a very mature one, and break it in half in order to get it. They'll pull it down to the ground. So when you see that, and that's later in the summer, you probably shouldn't be around there either. Never approach bears or bear cubs. It's amazing how many reports I hear of people feeding bears off the highway. There was a big problem with the Kennedy upgrade on the highway going over to Pino Ucluelet. The problem with just feeding them is that they become conditioned very fast. And the reason they become conditioned is even if you throw an apple core or food out your window into the ditch and they find it, now it's a smell and it's a reward. So it's food, and they can smell the food, and they can smell that people provided the food. So with that great big area of their brain, it's all linked to food, and I can't emphasize enough about not throwing out anything out your window. It's whether it's biodegradable or not, and always being clean, and never feed a bear or a cub, because maybe you'll leave after you do that, but the next person that comes along might get attacked because they're not providing food. So next. That is the end of, oh, it's always good to have a bit of bear humor at the end. Any other questions? We're not talking about hiking. There's also attractants around your home, and that can be fruit trees that aren't harvested enough. And it can be putting your garbage out the night before instead of waiting for the day of the garbage pickup.
Someone is asking if bear bells are effective.
The problem with the bear bells is you don't listen. I would not recommend the bear bells. They make the noise. The bear's hearing is still more attuned to the human voice. And if you follow the protocol and listening, if you do the Deo and make it or whatever you want, whatever musician you want to mimic out there, if you do that and force yourself to listen, and that's the hard thing to do, you should never run into a problem. Because a bear doesn't want to get in a fight, but if they think they have to defend their territory, then they will.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Warren? Okay, well, with that, I will give a very gracious and appreciative thank you to both Howie and Warren for this evening's presentation. And I will also stop recording as of the end of this sentence.